Hey everyone, Sleepy Reader here. Damien, your old comic book friend, perhaps. I had a pretty good week of reading comic books. I actually got all of my new books read before Friday, or by Friday. But then, after doing the comic book hangout, where I sort of got to talk about what I read anyway, I ran out of time, free time, to do this video. My comic book thoughts, but I still want to do it. I think I just said I had a good week reading comic books. I had a good time with everything I bought, in one way or another, but there was one kind of questionable black sheep in the bunch that I think I'll just get out of the way and talk about first, although I'm still not entirely sure what to say about it. It's Jonathan Ross and Ian Churchill's The Revenge, or Revenge. At one point, I think when it was listed, it was called The Revenger, and I thought it was called The Revenge, but it's just called Revenge. Calling it just Revenge seems like a less good title to me. But I added this to my pull list sight unseen because I was interested in reading more Jonathan Ross. I'd heard good things. Well, I'd read part of what was that one about? Was it called Superpowers? Something like that. I read part of that and liked it, but somehow didn't get all the issues. And then I just heard I heard interesting things about other things he'd written. And when I read the description of this, it sounded like something that would be fun and kind of up my alley in a little bit of a twisted way, about this betrayed movie star who goes crazy and takes on the persona of the character he plays in a movie to get revenge on people. I didn't think it would be like the most sophisticated, complex comic ever made or anything like that. But it was initially very shocking when I actually read it, and I don't know if there's any pages I can show. It opens up with someone's skin being cut off, and we're shown that in a very graphic way. And at the same time, it's extra horrifying because we're inside the person's head, and although they're paralyzed by some kind of drug, they can feel everything that's happening. And then along with graphic scenes of sex and these torturous kind of surgery, we also get more symbolic scenes of like naked women with their flesh rotting off and stuff. Well, here's a page. The art has this odd kind of, I don't know how to quite describe the art, but it's a little bit slick and a little bit ugly at the same time, and it gets very ugly, of course, when it's doing the really gross parts. They kind of like to mix scenes of the surgery and him having sex with his porn star wife. He's a 73-year-old man, and she's a porn star, a young porn star, who convinces him to get this radical new plastic surgery, which of course turns out not to be at all what it seems, and is part of her betrayal of him. It's hard to find. There's almost no page without some kind of gore on it. Here's one if I kind of... yeah, too hard. I hopefully didn't... but it's just... I mean, I guess it's a little bit yucky, but you can kind of see some of the stuff there. So I didn't know what to make of it, because by the end, I kind of wanted to know what he's going to do next. I mean, maybe he has nothing planned but just a gory series of revenges. Scenes of vengeance, gory vengeance against the people who've done this to him. Or maybe it's going to maybe he's going to find some way to make it even more twisted and even more tasteless. I think when you add in the fact that the wife who betrays him is a porn star, and you show them having sex, and you draw it in a very... It's not a clinical way. It's like an ugly version of Annie Fanny. Is that what she was called? Little Annie Fanny? Was she in Playboy magazine? What it kind of reminds me of a little bit but it is some kind of over-the-top underground comics, you know, that they used to have. Some people would go really over the top, particularly S. Clay Wilson. But with the bright color and it being a longer comic book where you focus for a much longer period of time on the grotesqueness, it does have a stronger effect. And it also kind of reminds me of like some of the more disturbing EC horror comic book kind of things, where one spouse does something awful to the other spouse and then gets their comeuppance by the end. Those always took about 7 pages, and although those pushed the boundaries for the time, this is much more detailed and combines the graphic sex with the graphic bloodiness. And another funny thing, you know, as I sight unseen, I put it on my pull list, and I've been having trouble making changes to my pull list, and I kind of somehow I feel, even though they have not been very good at dealing with my pull list at my shop, I somehow feel guilty about changing the pull list a lot, maybe just because they can't seem to handle it. So I don't know. Oh, I like the back cover, which shows a poster of one of his comeback movie where he plays this gory kind. It's kind of like, you know, Dirty Harry and Death Wish, but with modern, you know, gore. The movie that he's doing, and then this comic book tops that. And there may be movies that are even more gross than this, but I don't want to see them. So I don't know. And I already faced the situation where a 8-year-old boy came into my storage room here and was poking around at the comic books, and I had to quickly grab this one. There's probably other ones that I don't really want to see, but this one in particular, and try to hide it without him noticing, so he wouldn't ask me, "What's that? I want to see it." So there's that problem too with having something like this around. So I don't know. I was expecting something with a bit more of a sophisticated feel from Image Comics, perhaps too. Anyway, so oh, there it is. I got Hawkeye this week, but I also was way behind on my Hawkeye reading, so I actually had the 4 previous issues to read before it. So I read 4 issues of Hawkeye in a row, and no, I haven't gotten issue 16, which came out a few weeks ago. So I probably need to pick that up. And I enjoy each issue of Hawkeye. Like, I really loved it when Franco Francisco Francavilla was drawing it. My Francavilla love continues. I mean, I love his art in, in lots of things, but most recently in Afterlife with Archie. He seems to really be in the right place. But he also seems to work really well with Matt Fraction here with Hawkeye. You know, it's not as light a comic book when it's done with Aja as it is with Francavilla. So definitely the different artists bring a totally different feel to it. And I think Francavilla almost always does his own coloring, and it looks like he did on this one. So anyway, so it was that, and then 2 issues by Aja, including the most recent one, and then another issue that was not bad at all, with the drawings by Wu, a woman with the last name Wu, Annie Wu. And I like her art quite a bit. I mean, it's another different thing. I think the coloring by the same colorist Hollingsworth, who does the color with Aja, kind of helps bring them together. I find problems with, in some ways, Hawkeye girl, the young Hawkeye. I'm forgetting her name right at the moment. It'll come back to me. Kate, I believe. Kate Bishop. She, in this comic book, you know, differently from other appearances of her that I read, like in Young Avengers, she acts like a really young teenager here. and it's kind of fun and whimsical, but completely takes away any of my belief in her as a superhero, other than being good with an arrow. But I would just think she would be arrested right away. I mean, they kind of make reference to the possibility of arresting her. But it was still a lot of fun. And then, yeah, the Aja artwork continues to really please me. And so I enjoy the individual issue, but like looking at the whole thing, I can't believe I'm on issue 15 and it's still this plot with this group of bros who want to take over an apartment building. And it's not like Matt Fraction has given us lots of interesting layers to that to make it worth 15 issues. It's more like he's given us a lot of little shticks about it. And as I think I was trying to say, or did say on the comic book roundtable, it's wearing a little thin on me, the idea that Clint Hawkeye is so incompetent, so much of kind of a loser, that if he didn't have his money and I don't know where the money comes from, and his Avengers connection and just dumb luck, he'd long since, be dead, and nothing would work for him. So yeah, I just want to, even though he's it's fun to have kind of a bumbling hero who bumbles through some things, but I want to see him take a more active stance. Maybe he's a little bit too passive and is waiting for these bros to come after him. I mean, for 15 issues, it's time to wrap up the bros, which means make Hawkeye stand up and act positively eventually, wrap that up, and then move on to something else. It's almost, I keep sensing Fraction is kind of an insecure writer or something, and so he's got this one thing and he's insecure to move on. And he's inching towards moving on by moving Kate out and sending her to the West Coast. And it's kind of weird for me, it's kind of weird to switch back and forth between their stories, since there seems to be little connection between them anymore, except that they share Fraction's sense of humor, and they're both kind of bumbling heroes. Yeah, so I think I'll still keep getting it, especially as long as the art is this interesting and good. But it's just a little lower in my estimation than it used to be. There's also the question of what happened at the end, and we spoiled it on Comic Book Roundtable, but I try not to spoil things in mine. But I guess after hearing how other people interpreted the end, I kind of misread it a little bit. It was just images of violent actions, and I thought different people had different things happen to them, although it's still kind of an ending that is a bit extreme, and will no doubt be mostly taken back next issue, I assume. So hopefully that doesn't spoil anything that way too much. So yeah, Hawkeye was fun, and it's fun to read that many Hawkeyes in a row, but it also just ends up making me a bit more critical of it. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which to me has no nostalgia value, no connection to my youth. The only connection it has to my 20s when it came out is that I kind of didn't think much of it then. I just thought they were this jokey thing that was just completely a derivative of other comics, making, just spoofing other comics that then by accident became this big, huge phenomenon for kids. And I don't know if that analysis is wrong of what their early comics were like, because I haven't gone back to read them. But I've been talked into giving them a shot now by people who really love them. And so the 3 issues that I've read all kind of enchant me a bit. And they're not jokey at all. And the art, so both the art and kind of the pacing of the story is kind of lyrical and lightly sentimental without being heavy-handed. Beautiful colors, beautiful art. Makes me sort of believe in these animal creatures as spiritual beings with lots of personality. When I read the trade of the first I think 5 issues of this particular run, and now we're up to issue 31, I did not get any of those feelings. It felt repetitive and overly preachy. I mean, like the characters talked too much and explained too much and went on and on about it, and just didn't really sink its hooks in me at all. Luckily, I was already hooked into this these later issues. I don't know when in the sequence it would become the kind of Turtles that I would enjoy. Because it's by the same writers, but different artists. The artist on the earlier stuff, some people like this art, but I found it just on the edge of amateurishness, or of semi-professional, you might say. And I didn't like the coloring here in the trade the way I really love the coloring in the current issues. So anyway, I'll keep on with this. It's hard for me to know, like, since these issues have been a kind of quiet lull, and at the end of this issue the action kicks back in, a group of bird-like creatures comes and attacks them. I don't know if once the action kicks in, whether it will be less interesting to me than the slower times. I'm interested to find out. It seems quite daring to take these turtle characters in this kind of non-comedic way, and surprising that it really works. But maybe they've always been like that, and I just didn't know. I just know them as, you know, the guys who say "dude" a lot and eat pizza. Adventures of Superman was really interesting art-wise. It was probably a less impressive issue writing-wise than it usually is, which is not to say it was bad writing. It was still enjoyable, but the stories just didn't have the same impact. The 20-page story in here with art by someone Sean Cheeks Galloway. I don't know if he's known for something else, or I almost would guess that he came out of animation, and it's like you're seeing a new animated Superman show. You're seeing stills from a new animated Superman show with its own distinct style. And so that made it a lot of fun. And it's not just the style, like the layouts and the angles of everything were done really well. So that added to the enjoyment of it. A lot of good visual storytelling, I guess you'd say, with a lot of personality. You know, I don't think you'd want all your Superman drawn like this, but it's fun as a divergence, momentary entertainment or way of taking Superman. It's almost like if the old, what was he called? There's that old Max Fleischer animation met a little bit of a anime style, maybe. But both the stories in here have to do with kids sending letters to Superman, and Superman able to help them to some extent. In the first story, after 20 pages, not helping him that much. So I'm not sure what the point of that was supposed to be. The second story is more about a child who witnesses Superman fighting and is inspired by his bravery and everything, because she is in a cancer ward, I guess, or is sick, or visiting a sick sibling maybe. And that also had very good art, and just slightly different from the usual that you would see in Superman art. That artist was also not familiar to me. And I can't find the credits. There they are. Victor Ibanez and Matthew Willison, colorist, one of my favorite colorists. So yeah, so if you haven't picked this up, I wouldn't feel bad for missing it, but if you have, you know, hankering for some Superman stories, it's still not bad. Then an Image comic book that I found myself after issue 3 really looking forward to issue 4. And the art, this is Umbral, the sort of immersive fantasy, you know, magic and faraway land, imaginary land kind of thing, with following a young thief's adventures as these evil Umbral creatures are trying to take over her world. And the art seems to be getting even better, but the story has this kind of pattern of revelation and then running away and running through some weird but not quite clear to me, the reader, what the landscape is that they're running through as they run in and out of magic worlds, and they're going up ladders. I think maybe this is like a cliffside city with a port down below with ladders, or pirate caves that act as a port for the pirates down below with ladders. So all of that's interesting, but it needs to develop more. And hopefully it will. I mean, in issue 3, it felt like it was developing more. And then now this issue, it feels like a pause mostly for a lot of running around. And like some ghostly pirates show up, and I'm not clear what they are or where they're in the Umbral. I don't know. But it looks good. I'm definitely still getting Umbral. From the good stuff, I feel like there'll be more good stuff. It's possible it could all fall into the blurry side. A comic book that I think I may be the only one getting in the comic book community on YouTube. Someone else must be getting it. My comic book store carries a few copies, and I know the owner of the store really likes Sergio Aragones. It's Sergio Aragones' sort of Do Anything I Want to Do comic book called Sergio Aragones Funnies, which is from Bongo Comics. This is number 12. It's bi-monthly. And every issue seems to be a mix of kind of one-page gags and... well, they always come with an introduction, which the introductions themselves are quite charming, and so Sergio talking directly to us. And then in black and white and color, and he's good in both, I think. And then even like little games for kids to play, like this is find the two characters who are identical, which is the really fun thing is it's just not just a puzzle, but you get to look more closely at his art, or you with your child get to look more closely at his art while you try to solve the puzzle. And just seeing the zaniness of his art is part of the fun. And then usually there's about 2 longer stories in each issue. And in this issue, the first one is a spoof of superheroes. It's called A Hero's Dream. It might be, you know, kind of a little bit like Kick-Ass in the sense it's about a real person who wants to be like a comic book superhero. But everything goes wrong for him. And it's very funny in its telling. So that's kind of typical, you know, from the artist and creator of Gru that you would expect. But then the other main story is called Toshiro Mifumi, and it's just about the times, because there's more than one time, where Sergio Aragones met his favorite actor of all time, Toshiro Mifumi, the famous Japanese actor, most famous for playing samurais, like in the Seven Samurais, who Aragones got to meet in Mexico and then later in California. And it's very charmingly told autobiographical story, much different than, you know, your normal autobiography, just because it's still full on in Aragones' style and with his sensibility. So you just get this. I mean, he must have been doing comics and drawing. I think he must be in his mid-70s, you know, for like probably 55, 60 years. And there's still so much energy and joy in it and fun. And, you know, he, no matter what he's drawing, he just makes it seem effortless. So, and I didn't even realize that he's still doing Gru, but he mentions that he's still doing Gru in his introduction, and he's still drawing for Mad Magazine, which I haven't read in years. If they just published Sergio Aragones' Mad work, I'd love a collection of that. Maybe there is one out there. So if this appeals to anyone, look for it, or maybe you have to ask your comic book shop for it or order it specially. I may just be lucky, because there's a lot of obscure stuff my comic book shop doesn't get, but that they just happen to want to carry this. Because I put it on my pull list and they keep forgetting to actually put it in my box. Maybe they'll eventually remember. Finally, we have just an absolutely delicious comic book to read, Black Science number 4, issue 4, yeah. Great cover, just blazingly good art by Matteo Scalera. I'm just, you know, I'm becoming a huge fan of this artist. One thing, you know, along with just how cool the art looks, he does these wonderful 2-page spreads. And, you know, talk about something that you don't want to go digital for. A 2-page, so it's not a spread of one picture, but it's a 2-page layout. And he's just, for me, he's a master of the 2-page layout. And the coloring in here is absolutely incredible by Dean White. Now, I think the coloring is by Dean White, but I just heard people on iFanboy interpret the credits as being that Dean White just did a few pages where it literally looks like a painting, like that first page. Because what it says is Matteo Scalera, artist, Dean White, painted art. Now, I think almost everyone else took painted art to mean just that he does the coloring in a very sort of intense painterly fashion that adds so much to the art. So I'm not sure who's right about that. I think I'm going to see if I can look into it. Because there are pages that look more like paintings and pages that look less like paintings. There's a lot more stuff that looked like paintings in the very first issue. But this, to me, recaptures the excitement of that first issue. I and a lot of people loved that first issue. And the other issues have been good. But this one, I think, is back up to the level of that first issue and brings it all together. This is going to really kick ass as a graphic novel. It might be one that someday I'll want to buy in a deluxe hardcover version when I get the chance. You can see some of those panels really look painted and others don't. So, yeah, I can't wait for the next issue. I'm loving this. I think that, you know, there's something usually about Rick Remender's stories are just sort of wacky and crazy and way out there. And Matteo Scalera feels like an artist who really is really right for Rick Remender. You know, like I enjoyed many issues of his Uncanny X-Force, but sometimes the artists on that were just wrong. And, you know, I kind of wish that Matteo could be doing everything that Remender writes. Although I hear great things about Deadly Class and the artist on that, so I should check that out since I'm loving Remender work so much, especially when he's doing indie stuff. The reason I so far haven't gone to Deadly Class is I just assume that I don't want to read a book about high school, even if it's a high school for assassins, but I could be wrong, so I'll probably pick up a few issues of that. Yeah, go Deadly Science. And if you're not picking it up, you've probably got a great first volume of the trade to look forward to. Okay, well, I didn't think I would take 30 minutes to do this. What was it? I did like 33 comics in about 30 minutes before, and now it's taking me 30 minutes to do 6. Anyhow, thanks for making it all the way through, if you did, and I will be back soon.